My name is Chris Beaumont. I'm one of the partners at Clive Owen LLP, and I'm the author, or one of the authors of the Kreston Academies Benchmarking Survey 2017. It's the fifth year we've done this survey, and whilst Clive Owen act for 45 trusts including 80 schools across the North East, within Kreston we act for over 300 trusts, which include over 600 schools, which represents over 10% of all schools within England. So we now have a significant bank of data on which to actually review the finances of the academies and actually advise them on how they compare to other schools within the sector. So it may be that one school has significant overspend in, say, sort of heat and light costs compared to others within the sector. It might be they're out of kilter on things like teaching costs. The education sector has seen significant change in the last year with white paper that was introduced, then a supposed U-turn on that, change of Prime Minister and change of Education Secretary. So all those have slowed down the potential conversion of maintained schools across to academies. But what we're finding over the last probably sort of 3 or 4 months is that pace of change, especially in the North East, is increasing, with a number of schools now asking for advice on how they actually convert and the systems and policies and procedures that they actually need in place, and actually what they should be considering from a financial angle after that. One of the things which the sector is acutely aware of is that the National Audit Office is looking for, or thinks that there will need to be significant reductions within the sector, with some £3 billion need to be saved by 2019-20, and given that General Annual Grant has reduced slightly within the last year by about £125 per pupil for primary and £150 on secondary, and there have been significant increases in terms of teachers' pension scheme, with the increase announced in September 2015, whereby the employer's contribution increased from 14.1% to 16.4%, and then the change in employers' national insurance from 10.4% to 13.8% in April 2016. Those are all giving additional headaches from a financial aspect for academies to actually deal with. Therefore, they've looked in a lot of cases at the on costs that they've got, so sort of the admin costs, but now having to consider where else they can make savings. In the last year, we've seen savings really around the support staff within academies, and that's demonstrated by the fact that staff costs have come down slightly during the last year, but that's mainly the reduction in support staff rather than teaching staff, and that's demonstrated by the fact that the teacher to pupil ratio has stayed roughly static compared to the previous year.
Hi, my name's Shotton. I'm a partner at Clive Owen LLP. I have a specialism with Academy schools, so we're working with a number of secondary and primary schools, both single school and multi-academy trusts. One of the interesting things that came out of the benchmarking report this year is the shift in the number of trusts that are actually in deficit. So if you looked at last year's report, those in deficit before depreciation account for 21% of trusts within our benchmarking report. This year that figure's doubled, it's up at 42%, so nearly half of all academies now are showing a deficit. In addition, those academies that are showing a deficit in excess of 10% of income have grown steadily from, in 2014, 15% to 21% in 2016. It means that where previously, when you looked at staff costs as a proportion of total income, that break-even point used to be at around about 80%. That's now shifted down to around about the 75-76% mark. That figure can obviously fluctuate depending on whether certain services are in-house, the likes of catering being a prime example of that. In spite of those trends, perhaps surprisingly, one thing that came out of the report is that there's actually been a reduction in the average salary costs of both the head teacher and of teaching staff across the sector. So taking teaching staff, the average has dropped from £43,000 a few years back to the current average of £37,000. So that's clearly a move towards schools trying to cut costs with older teachers moving out of the profession and more use of newly qualified NQT teachers coming in at a lower salary base. Similar story, as I said, with the average salary of head teachers as well. There has been a shift in the head teacher's role. So going back to the maintained school days, quite a lot of it was about delivering education. Now, as an academy, a lot of other things fall under that role, particularly on HR, finance. That obviously brings added pressures, and I think we are starting to see some of the older heads starting to retire and being replaced by people who are younger, and a lower salary cost that's associated with that. The trend within the sector is very much a move from single academy trusts to multi-academy trusts. The rationale behind that, economies of scale, knowledge sharing, hopefully being able to cut costs as part of that process. I think when you look at the secondary academy level, it can be quite clearly shown that there does appear to be a lower cost per pupil on each of the key headings. Broadly speaking, that saving can be upwards of 10% of the cost per pupil. When you move to the primary sector, the financial information is a little more muddled. What you can clearly see between 2015 and 2016 is that both at a single primary school trust and at a multi-academy primary trust, there have been cost savings across the piece. So you see on the headings that virtually in every area schools have been able to cut costs. Again, we do see that there are some savings to be had by being in a multi-academy trust structure. The one anomaly on there is in relation to the management time, because in that area you see a large spike in relation to the management cost of a primary multi-academy trust. We're only speculating, but we presume that is a case of trust gearing up for the future. So once the trust becomes of a certain size, they will look to bring in-house management expertise in various areas. Until the trust gets the required number of schools within there, that cost per pupil will be higher than at the ideal level of schools within the trust. And I think what we're seeing there really is a gearing up of resource and expertise within the trusts for that growth phase. Some of the messages that we've talked about today will likely resonate with a number of you when you're looking at the challenges within your own school or trust. We have a wealth of data that backs up the messages we've talked about today, and we also have a lot of expertise in helping schools understand their current and future budgets in light of the rest of the sector. If anyone does want to get in touch, we'll gladly work with you to try to help you evaluate your own position versus your peers in the sector.